Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. I'm Peter Beinart, a fellow at the Foundation. Today is August 6th, 2025, and I'm glad to be here with Aseel Aburass, Director of the Occupied Territories Department at Physicians for Human Rights Israel, and one of the authors of PHRI's newest report, Destruction of Conditions of Life, a health analysis of the Gaza Genocide. The report describes what they call, quote, a deliberate cumulative dismantling of Gaza's health system, and with it, its people's ability to survive. This amounts to genocide, unquote. PHRI released this paper last week on the same day that B'Tselem released their report, Our Genocide. I interviewed Yuli Novak of B'Tselem about their assessment of Israeli genocide last week and encourage you to listen to that conversation. I'm grateful to be here today with Aseel to continue this conversation and to learn about PHRI's assessment based on their focus on health and healthcare. Aseel, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Peter.
So we now tragically have a number of reports about genocide. It's not the reports that are tragic, it's the genocide that's horrifying and tragic from Amnesty International, from B'Tselem. But your PHRI's, yours has a specific focus on genocide as it relates to the destruction of healthcare. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the idea behind it and the findings and why you believe that Israel's attack on Gaza's healthcare system constitutes genocide.
Mhm. So, yes, as you mentioned, we've published a report a week ago, last Monday. And our report by PHRI is a report that is documenting legally and a health-based analysis of Israel's conduct in Gaza, and we conclude that this amounts to genocide. As you mentioned, our focus, the focus in our report is Article 2C of the Genocide Convention. This is the main focus that we're analyzing, which is probably your listeners are familiar, but I will say it: to deliberately inflict on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So the focus is the healthcare system, the destruction of it, and then also the conditions of life. So for the past 22 months, we've documented, and other, UN agencies, humanitarian organizations on the ground, and from far, Palestinians, everybody were saying, we've been documented that Gaza's system was attacked from day one. The Gaza's health system was attacked from day one. Already 3 weeks into the war, there was already the Gaza Ministry of Health already said that the system have collapsed. So the system was systematically dismantled. We're not looking only on hospitals, and probably most people are familiar with that, but that's not the only thing that makes a system, a system. Hospitals as infrastructure, but then also evacuation routes, water and sanitation, food supply chain, medical training, maternal health services, they were all destroyed in a way that each one is affecting the other. And that makes survival now, immediate survival, and on the long term, basically impossible. So we're looking at the destruction of conditions of life and the healthcare system as something that didn't happen in a single moment, right? It unfolds as a more prolonged campaign of destruction that is targeting the foundation of life itself. When you basically destroy a healthcare system of a society, it's not just technical. A healthcare and hospitals are where you are born, where you get treated, where you die, where you get care, and dismantling the system that also has a very profound core in the Gazan society. You also dismantle, you break, a core kind of a core block within the Gazan society. So in the report, we also, of course, address the other articles. We address Article 1A, which is killing, and 2B, which is, create bodily and mental harm. But the core argument of this report rests on the deliberate a creation of conditions, a destroying of conditions under which life cannot continue. I can go more into the structure of the report unless you want to
Um, so I guess so. Genocide has in part to do with intent, and you
Right,
talked about the deliberate destruction. So I'm curious if
right.
you can talk about the evidence in the report that this was not that this was a deliberate attack on the
Mm-hmm.
healthcare system.
Yeah. So this is a central question, and it's one of the hardest to prove, right? Intent. And reports before us, Amnesty is one of them. They usually the focus is on incitement to genocide by Israeli officials, Israeli, war cabinet, previous military officials, what they've said in the public, and there's many. And we all familiar with the ones that were said in the beginning of the genocide through the Israel's prime minister, Israel's president, no water, no food, right? We all familiar with these incitements, and that's absolutely valid and important. And there's so many of those, but we have and we included those statements and we analyzed them, but we didn't stop there. Our focus was in this report to deepen to not just on the rhetoric and political declaration, and we asked and we looked at the conduct on the ground. What does the pattern tell us, right? How can we analyze intent from this pattern? So when we lay that out, this pattern throughout the past 22 months, chronologically, right? We also in the report we analyze the phases. We analyze from October 2023 until June 2025 the destruction of the healthcare system to show chronologically that the destruction and dismantling of the conditions and hospitals happened consistently through the past 22 months. When we look at this chronologically, also geographically, there was no place that was spared. There was no area, even if it was called, a safe area, there was no area that was spared, no hospital that was spared. And then also thematically, all conditions of life, water, food, aid, a support system, hospitals. So chronologically, geographically, and thematically, we saw a clear and consistent pattern. Um, and this is that the health system was attacked from every direction, bombing hospitals, forced evacuation and displacement of people and of patients and medical personnel, aid obstruction, unlawful detentions of medical personnel, starvation, a forced starvation, a collapse of clean water and sanitation infrastructure. This is, there was no aspect of life or about survival that just remained untouched within the Gaza Strip, and taking all of that, looking at all of this, we see it as a coordinated, sustained, and it all was coordinated and sustained over the 22 months. The destruction happened from from the south to the center of Gaza to the north, and there was basically no a possibility to recover. And and that's how we approached intent. So it's not just we analyze those, but it's not just through quotes, but by showing that the only reasonable, and this is the standard, the only reasonable explanation to this pattern, to the timing, to the location, to the consistency of these attacks, um, are just that there's intent to destroy and to collapse basically the conditions for life, of life for Palestinians in Gaza as a group. And in international law, that constitutes a genocidal intent. That's how we analyzed it.
So as you know, Israel's defenders often say Israel was
Mhm.
attacking these healthcare facilities because Hamas was using them as, embedding its fighters and launching its attacks from these
Right.
healthcare facilities. I'm curious what you found on that score.
Right. Exactly. It's not just that, but also people say that there wasn't a military objective, right, in this genocide. So I think when you put this analysis, the one that I just gave, when you see that, when you say that this is genocide, when you put this lens of genocide, I think everything changes in our documentation, in documentation of UN agencies, of UN special rapporteurs, of independent investigations that, by the way, mo all of them happened remotely because Israel is, not letting in foreign journalists or a third party investigator to go in Gaza to, verify those claims for both sides. So taking all of that, we found that there's no connection between the scale of harm that happened and the claims that were made. Basically, the destruction of Gaza's health system exceeds, in in my opinion, personal opinion, but also in the report, exceeds any plausible military, justification or necessity. And in fact, many of these claims that the health system is part of Hamas, and there's many claims that the doctors themselves are terrorists. I need to mention that they were even made before October 7. They were made, we were able to track it, it would be 2008. And they were used as a way to legitimize this attack, as a way for the world to green light these attacks on the hospitals. We all remember this fabricated at this point. We know for 100% this video was fabricated of Al Shifa. That was the first time the hospital was basically destroyed in October 2023. This video by the Israeli military have been published, and the connect and because of this video, because of these claims, there was a justification to destroy a whole hospital. Mind you, this is the largest, most advanced hospital in the Strip. It was built before Israel state was built before 1948. It was destroyed just like that. When you destroy a hospital, you're not just destroying a hospital and that's it. You are affecting the whole healthcare system, right? We're also speaking about this cascading effect. When Al Shifa have been destroyed in October, that created a domino effect to other hospitals that had to bear the burden of the largest hospital that now cannot accept patients, right? So to go back to my point, these claims where while we did not we there's no connection between the destruction that happened and them, we did find a connection between these claims and the destruction of the healthcare system, the legitimization. And not just but also it's more than just the I see it as an active thing. It wasn't just uh, a passive, a quietness from the international community, but it was active, a green light to destroy the healthcare system. Um, yeah.
So if the intent was to destroy the healthcare system, um, given your analysis, why do you think Israel just wanted to destroy the healthcare system? Was it because the goal was expulsion of the population, so that if you make conditions of life impossible, people are going to leave? What do you have a thought based on the report of the reason that Israel, if the argument is that Israel wanted to destroy the healthcare system, an argument
Mhm.
about why Israel wanted to do that, or was it just fury and revenge?
I think it's both. But from the beginning, we've seen it wasn't chaos. We don't see this as the chaos of war or how's it called, a damage, a side damage that was the result of the war. It was calculated from the beginning. We've already few weeks into the war, Israel have issued a evacuation order for 22 hospitals, right? Few weeks in, there was an issuing of such evacuation order, and to evacuate in a hospital, it's not something. First of all, it's illegal to ask something like that, but also it's impossible. The Ministry of Health was given a task that basically is impossible, and not doing it means that the threat was, we will bomb the hospital if you don't do so. So from the beginning, we were able to see this genocidal intent, but also it was calculated, to destroy the Al Shifa hospital already from the beginning, few weeks in. And then also, by December 2023, and this is also an analysis we did, which is, looking at all of the phases of the war. By December 2023, end of December 2023, all hospitals in the north of Gaza were basically, they were destroyed. And we correlated in a way as you mentioned, to displace people, not of course, to destroy survival, but also to displace, because hospitals, I mentioned at the beginning, they hold, especially in Gaza, they hold it's not just practical, and health, it also holds a sentimental value. In previous wars, in 2014, 2008, usually a hospital, because you think it's a protected area, it's a protected place, it's where people go to seek refuge. And this is what happened in previous violent cycles, offensive by Israel on Gaza. And it's true, right? Usually, with what we think is that the hospital is the last place that will get water, that will get, sorry, it will, with everything that has collapsed, a hospital will still get water, food, electricity. So you seek refuge. But what Israel did, because we saw in the first phase, the first few months, was to basically ethnic cleanse the north of Gaza, right? And it succeeded to destroy all of the hospital by December 2023. And also that correlate with the displacement. There was evacuation order, and hundreds of thousands, close to 1 million people were displaced, from the north, right, to the south. So we do correlate it with ethnic cleansing, but also to create for life, so basically to create life that is impossible to survive even after the war. So let's say now enough pressure happens finally, and the war stops, right? There's a ceasefire. We see that even with this, a destroyed healthcare system will continue to kill, because you might be able to bring in food, enough and nutritious food. You might be able to bring in a clean water, but a destroyed healthcare system, it will take years. I mean, I'm saying years lightly, tens of years, maybe if not hundreds of years, to rebuild it. And in the meanwhile, people with undiagnosed diseases will continue to die. Right now, there's no diagnostic machines almost in Gaza. If you have cancer, you don't know you have cancer. A lab machinery, it doesn't exist, and many have been destroyed. So a destroyed healthcare system, and as well a healthcare system in which 1,500 healthcare providers were killed as well, it will continue to kill. So this is our conclusion, is that, and really, and connecting it with the intent, when you destroy the healthcare system, you are creating an impossible life. You cannot survive, in Gaza. And this is how we connect it to intent.
Obviously, the focus has been mostly on Gaza, but I'm curious if you have anything to say about the healthcare system in the West Bank. There's also been
Of
a
course.
great deal of violence by Israeli settlers and by the Israeli military in the West Bank, and what the healthcare impact has been there.
Of course. So, right, our focus in the report is the analysis of Gaza, but uh, but the healthcare system in the West Bank has also been affected, by Israel for the past 2 years. By the past 2 years, we've seen and we've documented a sharp, rise in attacks, both on infrastructure, on hospitals, on medical personnel, on emergency medical team, on ambulances, on clinics. It's also unprecedented in the West Bank. We see even sometimes similar tactics, right? So, forceful evacuation is forceful displacement of civilians in the West Bank. In the northern West Bank, there was more than 40,000 people who have been displaced, and still not able to return to their houses. Hospitals, there was even airstrikes, that was bombed on hospitals in the West Bank, in Jenin, for example. There was military, there was, soldiers who went inside hospitals. They detained patients, they killed even patients. We see it as a kind of, um, you know, it's a similar, some people call it the gasification, right? How the similar tactics are being shifted also to the West Bank. And it didn't happen, it's not happening only now. It started already from October, where settlers in the West Bank have used this momentum, where there's anger and revenge. to basically ethnically cleanse communities from Area C in the West Bank, and to injure, to destroy, to kill, to steal property of West Bankers. Already few months into the war, there was tens of West shepherding communities who have been ethnically cleansed, and this is talking on Area C. And the northern part of the West Bank, we were able to document as well these kind of attacks on the healthcare system. But this is just in terms of attacks, but there's also strain. There's economic strain on the hospitals. There's as well, there's unprecedented number of killing and injured, whether by soldiers or by settlers. And the system is already, the hospitals in the West Bank are already strained before October 7th, in terms of capacity and also economically. And now adding this number of injured people, and people are being killed, it adds more strength. And of course, there's as well a lot of, we only hear about it in Gaza, but there's also a lot of pharmaceuticals and necessities, medical supplies that are missing. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, we've heard that there's a substitution of milk, for example, a formula for babies that is not going into the West Bank. Israel is blocking it and not letting, is blocking it, and it's not getting to the babies, to the infants. So this is just one example, and there's many. There's a whole list of medications that are running out, similar to Gaza, maybe in a different way, but it is this gasification that we're looking at, where I don't know if there's a term in English, but there's is a domino effect, right? Of things that are happening. We've seen similar patterns in Lebanon as well, of hitting hospitals, right, by Israel. Um, so yeah.
Um, so what is the report asking the world to do now in order, given that the genocide is already occurring, so it can't that you can
Right.
prevent the genocide, but what would you like the world to do now?
Right. So, what first of all, I want to say locally what I hope, locally, but I mean is Israel. What I hope is that it will normalize this term, it will normalize this conversation, and more organizations will say it. Human rights organizations will say it more, and hopefully also it will be normalized within the public. I know it's very hard, but this is one hope, and not just public. I mean also institutions, so medical institutions as well, and doctors. This is in terms of Israel. But then what my asks is firstly and mostly for a ceasefire and to stop the genocide, right? And then there are, as I mentioned, more than there was unlawful detention of medical personnel. Up until today, there's more than 100 who are still being held without charges. So these doctors and medical and healthcare providers should be, should go back to Gaza. They should. There was an example of a doctor who served in Al Nasser Hospital, right? Who was detained, and then few months after that he was released. And the moment, and to think of the trauma that he have witnessed, in Israeli prisons. The moment he was released, he went back to serve in Al Nasser Hospital. But that's just a testament of how much they are necessary in the healthcare system, local, because you can bring in, and of course all of the gratitude to foreign doctors, but there's a necessity also for the local human sources of Gaza to go back and to the healthcare system to serve the people. So this is another thing, and to stop the destruction of the healthcare system, of bombing hospitals. Let more aid in. Basically, open borders and let the aid in through, enough aid, and through UN-led mechanisms, not, GHF, the so-called GHF. H stands for humanitarian, but let aid in without delays, through the mechanism that were functioning even before the war. and accountability as well, because this all that everything that happened, we as you mentioned, we weren't able to stop it, but without accountability this could happen again. And this is not the first time that is happening, maybe to this scale, yes, but Gaza have witnessed escalations and destroying of the healthcare system within it as well. So without accountability, there is a fear that this could happen anytime. um, so accountability is also a big part of what we ask for.
So my last question is, I'm curious how this report has been received within Israeli medical circles, and in general, how you see the kind of response by, healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, others inside Israel since October 7th in facing what Israel has done in Gaza.
So to your first question, unfortunately, up until now that we're speaking, there was not enough coverage. While this report, ours and B'Tselem, was really, it was published in every major media outlet, right? Interviews, we're still receiving requests for interviews, but there was almost nothing from the mainstream Israeli media covering this report. Of course, Haaretz had a few articles. Haaretz is a more, left media outlet, but except that, there was almost nothing. And I don't know if it's a strategy or if it's just, nobody cares, or I'm not sure, but there was not enough coverage of this. So I'm afraid when we're speaking about medical community, I think they don't even know that that this is how we analyze. And of course, it's part of our, part of our advocacy. But relating to your second question, that there is basically a near total silence from medical community in Israel. So if I want to speak about the Israeli Medical Association, an association that, it claims to uphold ethical and professional standards, it did not publicly address the destruction of Gaza's health infrastructure, not during, the massive bombardments, not during sieges of hospitals, and not even at, when there's evidence of starvation. The only time that there was a public statement, it was after the British Medical Association have threatened to cut the ties with the Israeli Medical Association, and then only they have published a statement asking Israeli military to let more aid in. And in the letter, they have said that they didn't know that starvation have gotten to this point. They didn't know that this is the situation in Gaza, and it's this to say that this is, in my opinion, this is the silence, not just for the Israeli medical community, but silence is not neutral in the face of genocide. I think it has, it's political, it has political consequences. And the IMA and also the medical community, by not speaking up, by not speaking up, they are effectively legitimizing and dehumanizing Palestinian medical personnel. And in fact, in some cases, Israeli doctors have basically actively participated in this dehumanizing rhetoric. In the beginning of the war, there was a letter signed by many, if I'm not mistaken, tens, if not 100, Israeli doctors, publicly framing Gaza's health system as part of Hamas, urging Israeli army to destroy Shifa hospital, calling it a house of terrorists. I think they even used a more profound language, calling it basically a house of terrorists, and implying that medical personnel there are legitimate military targets. So there are, but of course, I have to say that there are individual doctors in Israel who have spoken up. Some have joined our cause to, to protect medical neutrality, to allow, to allow evacuation, to release detainees, a health worker. But in terms of institutionally, there was a silence, a total silence.
Thank you so much, Aseel, for sharing your time and analysis today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into this episode of Occupied Thoughts. Please make sure to check out the FMEP website, fmep.org, for resources related to this podcast and lots of other great content related to Israel and Palestine. And please make sure you are subscribed to this podcast to stay up to date. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify. And you can also watch video versions of our podcast, including this one on YouTube. And with that, I'm Peter Beinart signing off until the next episode of FMEP's Occupied Thoughts.